Imagine a policy, right? Seems straightforward, designed to protect national interests, boost jobs at home.
Uh-huh.
Now imagine it actually sparks a crime wave, makes your groceries more expensive, your car more expensive.
Yeah, that sounds counterintuitive.
Exactly. And on top of that, it pushes your closest ally, your biggest trading partner, to basically look elsewhere, forge new alliances, completely changing the global picture.
It happens more than you think.
Well, today we're looking into exactly that, the really surprising fallout from President Trump's tariffs on metals like copper, steel, and aluminum.
It's a fascinating case study in unintended consequences.
Our sources show a story that's way more complex than just trade figures. We're talking economic shifts, sure, but also crime, how other countries reacted strategically.
And how it all connects back to your daily life, which is key.
It really is. It's a look at how policy intentions can just unravel in ways nobody expected.
Yeah.
And hey, for more analysis like this, cutting through the noise on these global shifts, make sure you subscribe to the Geopolitics Gazette. You won't want to miss their insights.
Good call.
Okay, so let's start with the first piece, copper. The Trump administration slapped this big 50% tariff on imported copper products.
Right, using Section 232, that's the national security justification.
Yeah, and the stated reason was national security and, dealing with China since they produce the most refined copper. Seems clear enough on paper, doesn't it?
It does, but what's really fascinating and frankly kind of alarming is how fast it caused disruption, not stability. And mostly right here in the U.S.
So it backfired domestically first?
Pretty much immediately. The market shock was huge. Futures markets just plunged. And the price difference between copper traded here versus in London, it jumped to 31%.
31%? Oh.
Yeah, unprecedented. The highest gap ever recorded. It wasn't just a small adjustment. It was a major jolt to the whole system.
Okay, so markets are chaotic. What did that mean for people on the ground?
Well, that volatility had very real consequences. Copper prices shot up, maybe as much as 35% over the past year, according to reports.
Okay, so maybe that helps U.S. producers.
You'd think so, but ironically, it mostly fueled crime. We're talking a nearly $2 billion a year problem with copper theft across the country.
$2 billion from people stealing copper.
Yeah, it's wild. Think about it. Phone lines in California getting cut over and over. Entire bridges in L.A. stripped of their copper wiring.
That's insane, stripping bridges.
Absolutely. And local governments are spending millions fixing it, while thieves sell the metal on the black market for, pennies on the dollar comparatively.
So the policy accidentally created a booming black market.
Exactly. It completely changed the incentives around this basic metal. It really hits home how a trade policy can create totally unexpected risks right in our communities.
It really does. Beyond the crime, what about legitimate businesses? Were U.S. manufacturers feeling this too?
Oh, absolutely. Big time. For companies making appliances, cars, electronics, all those things rely on copper. The tariffs meant much higher costs for them.
Which hurts their competitiveness, I assume.
Definitely. Both at home and trying to sell overseas. And here's where it gets even more interesting, sort of ironic.
Go on.
A Chinese company called Wells adapted incredibly quickly. They'd already invested in a factory in Texas, making copper flat wire inside the U.S.
So they weren't importing the final product.
Exactly. Because it's made in Texas, it completely avoids the tariff. And get this, they planned another $100 million investment. They expect that one plant to bring in over half their overseas revenue soon.
Wow. So a policy aimed partly at countering China ends up benefiting a Chinese company operating on U.S. soil.
Precisely. It shows how adaptable businesses can be, sometimes undermining the very policy meant to constrain them.
So just to recap this first part, the copper tariff, meant for national security, leads to market chaos, a massive crime wave, strained infrastructure, higher costs for U.S. companies.
And an opening for a Chinese firm to thrive domestically.
It really sets the scene for how tangled these things get.
Absolutely.
Okay, so while the U.S. is dealing with all that, what about Canada, our northern neighbor? They were obviously caught in this too, right? Especially since their copper often gets refined elsewhere before coming here.
They were definitely in the crossfire. But their response, if you look at the bigger picture, was really one of strategic patience, calculated moves, not just reacting.
Playing the long game.
Exactly. They knew that over 85% of the trade between the U.S. and Canada was still tariff-free under the new agreement, KUSMA. That gave them a baseline of stability.
So they had some breathing room.
Right, but they weren't passive. Prime Minister Mark Carney pushed hard for diversification, new markets in Europe, Asia. And he encouraged a buy Canadian push at home, too.
Strengthening internally.
Yeah, and provinces started removing barriers to trade between provinces. Smart move. Diplomatically, they also tried to keep talks going. They suspended their digital services tax for a bit, which was worth about $1 billion Canadian dollars.
A goodwill gesture.
Sort of, yeah. Keep the lines open with Washington. Plus, they knew they had leverage, especially in energy and critical minerals. We'll see how important that becomes later.
So Canada was playing it cool, being strategic. Did this patience actually work out for them? You mentioned Prime Minister Carney talking about a reset.
It seems like it did, strategically speaking. Eventually, Canada did remove many of its own counter-tariffs on U.S. goods, the 25% ones. That started September 1st.
And Carney framed that how? Not as giving in.
No, he called it a reset, aligning with the U.S. to protect what he called the best trade deal any country currently has with America. President Trump actually welcomed it.
Interesting framing.
Carney argued it protected key Canadian sectors and kept their special access to the U.S. market. Stability for their businesses was the priority.
Oh.
And even with serious fights still going on over metals and cars, Canada ended up with the lowest average tariff rate into the U.S.
What was that rate?
Effectively about 5.5%. Compare that to the global average hitting the U.S., which was almost 16%. So it was like a tactical retreat that secured a better long-term position. Bit like chess, really.
It's definitely complex stuff, understanding these global chess moves. And for listeners wanting to stay on top of these dynamics, I really do recommend the Geopolitics Gazette. They offer fantastic, in-depth analysis. Check the link in our show notes.
It's worth it if you follow this stuff.
Okay, so if the copper situation was complicated, the next step, with steel and aluminum tariffs, seems like it escalated things even more, right? Affecting loads of everyday items.
Oh, yeah. Here's where it gets really interesting and maybe a bit concerning for everyone's wallets. The administration quietly expanded those tariffs, the 50% ones on steel and aluminum, to cover hundreds more products.
Like what kind of products?
Things you see every day. Car parts, refrigerators, even baby strollers, aluminum in your soda cans, stuff like that.
This really brings it home. What did that mean for you, the consumer, and for U.S. companies?
Well, for families, it meant higher grocery bills, more expensive cars. You start seeing those prices creep up, and it's not just inflation, it's these policy choices adding to the cost.
And for businesses.
It threw a huge wrench into the whole just-in-time manufacturing system, especially for industries like auto manufacturing, where parts cross the border constantly. Suddenly, that smooth flow was disrupted. Major headache.
Did U.S. companies end up paying the cost, or did foreign exporters absorb it like the administration hoped?
All the evidence, from analysts and news reports, points to American businesses and households bearing almost the entire burden. We're talking an estimated $160 billion in extra costs on about $320 billion worth of goods hit by these expanded tariffs.
Ouch. So the cost wasn't really passed back.
Not significantly, no. And you saw real-world consequences. John Deere, for example, had layoffs in the Midwest. They cited weaker sales, partly due to the tariff impacts.
And this created uncertainty too, right?
Exactly. Economists started talking about Trumpian uncertainty. Businesses were hesitant to expand or hire because the rules of trade kept changing so unpredictably. I remember talking to one small business owner, made specialized car parts.
Yeah.
Overnight, his material costs shot up 40%. He basically just threw his hands up, said, how can we plan anything when the rug can be pulled out from under us any week? That uncertainty was real.
So it wasn't just a gradual thing. It hit fast.
Incredibly fast. Mid-August, the tariffs on steel and aluminum didn't just double from 25 to 50%. They suddenly applied to over 400 new items. And there was no grace period. Goods already on ships heading to the U.S., suddenly subject to the higher tariff.
Wow. No warning.
None. And you saw it in the numbers. The Producer Price Index showed domestic steel mill products up almost 9% year over year, aluminum up over 13%.
And that cost gets passed on.
Directly into cars, fridges, packaged foods, everything. Plus, manufacturers needing specific types of imported aluminum, ones not even made in the U.S., just had to eat the extra cost. No domestic alternative existed. Smaller companies were especially hit hard.
That's a tough spot for manufacturers. So, with this major escalation hitting consumers and businesses, how did Canada react? They must have felt squeezed even more.
Oh, Canada definitely pushed back. They weren't just going to accept it. They kind of adopted a two-track approach. And importantly, they started seeing opportunity in all this disruption.
Okay, 2 tracks. What were they?
Well, publicly, you had figures like Ontario Premier Doug Ford really speaking out. He called the tariffs a hidden tax on American families. Very blunt. He announced funding for affected workers and pushed the federal government in Ottawa to tighten quotas on cheap steel imports. Made it clear they wouldn't be pushed around.
So strong words publicly. What about the federal government's strategy?
Prime Minister Carney stuck to that strategic patience idea. His government provided aid to hard-hit sectors like lumber and agriculture, but kept negotiations open with the U.S., always insisting on a fair deal.
And did they retaliate with their own tariffs?
They did. Ottawa slapped its own 25% counter-tariffs on about $30 billion worth of American goods. They also brought in tariff rate quotas on foreign steel, changed government buying rules to favor Canadian companies or trusted partners, and got ready to support major aluminum producers like Rio Tinto financially.
So a multi-pronged defense.
Exactly. Strengthen their own industry, protect workers, stabilize their supply chains. That was the defensive part.
But you said they saw opportunity. Where did that come in?
This is where it gets really strategic, almost a game changer. Trump's tariffs, especially the high ones on Canadian exports outside the U.S.-Canada deal, basically pushed Canada to play a new card. Its massive reserves of critical minerals.
Things like lithium, copper.
Copper, lithium, rare earths, exactly. Stuff the whole world needs for electric vehicles, wind turbines, all the green tech, plus defense applications. Canada realized these weren't just commodities, they were geopolitical leverage.
So they pivoted.
Big time. Carney went on this European tour in August. Huge outcome. A joint declaration with Germany to seriously deepen cooperation on these critical minerals.
Why Germany?
Germany is a huge industrial power, desperate to secure supply chains for its transition to green energy and EVs, especially supply chains not reliant on China or Russia. And Canada already had a trade deal with the EU called CETA, giving them preferential access.
So they built on that existing relationship.
Precisely. And they signed concrete deals. A Canadian mining company, Troy Gold, got a long-term copper supply contract with a German smelter. Another Canadian firm, Tornet Metals, partnered with a German company, VAC, to create a direct Canada-Germany supply chain for rare earth magnets. Super important for clean energy and defense.
And lithium, too.
Yep. Rocktech Lithium, which is actually a Canadian-German company, moved ahead with plans for lithium processing in Europe, key for batteries.
This sounds like Canada really positioning itself for the future.
Absolutely. The International Energy Agency expects demand for these critical minerals to quadruple by 2035. Canada basically said, okay, the U.S. is creating trade uncertainty. We'll be the stable, reliable supplier for Europe.
So the tariffs inadvertently pushed Canada to become a key player in Europe's green transition.
You could definitely argue that. Trump used tariffs like a hammer, trying to force concessions. But Ottawa skillfully turned that pressure into leverage, forging new partnerships and gaining more influence, even in its dealings back with the U.S. It was quite the strategic pivot.
The contrast is really stark, isn't it? One approach created a lot of domestic turmoil and unintended consequences. The other built resilience, new global ties, turning a challenge into a strategic win.
It really highlights different approaches to trade disputes in a globalized world.
Well, as we start to wrap up this really insightful discussion, just a reminder for everyone listening. For ongoing analysis of these complex global events, the Geopolitics Gazette is a fantastic resource. Do check them out.
Highly recommended.
So bringing it all together then, it seems these tariffs, originally intended to protect U.S. industries, ended up causing a whole host of unexpected problems at home, from rising crime linked to copper prices to higher costs hitting consumers' pockets directly.
And straining relationships.
And maybe the biggest irony, pushing a key ally like Canada to not just stand firm, but to actually strengthen its own independence, build powerful new alliances, especially with Europe around critical minerals. It kind of empowered others in unexpected ways.
It's a powerful lesson in how policies can ripple outwards, often far beyond their intended targets.
Definitely.
You know, this whole discussion really underscores how interconnected everything is. The global chessboard, it's always shifting.
Yeah.
And sometimes the moves you make to achieve one thing open up completely unforeseen possibilities or problems.
That leads to a big question, doesn't it?
It does. The question for all of us looking forward is, what defines the next era of global trade? Is it going to be more about isolation, friction, trade walls? Or can we find new ways to partner internationally, especially when it comes to the resources, like these critical minerals, that are absolutely vital for powering our shared future? That's something to think about.